Hi guys, it's Jim here. Now I'm usually a blogger, but I thought I'd try something just a little bit different today and make a vlog for you. Now, if any of you read the blog I wrote, I think it was about a month ago, on being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, I'll link it below if you want to take a read of it. I talk about me being diagnosed back in February. Now, when I was diagnosed, I'd never heard the term borderline personality disorder, didn't know what it meant, and I'd definitely never heard of anyone who had the disorder. When I tried to look online, there was very few people talking about the disorder, and there was even fewer men talking about the disorder. So with May being Borderline Awareness Month, I thought I'd just make a little video. Might not be great, but just make a little video on the topic and discuss my experience and recovery. This is a part of the video where I'm just going to read through the clinical definition of BPD, and then later on I'll go into my experience with the disorder. So if we have a quick look at the clinical definition, we find out it's called a cluster B personality disorder. Cluster B comprising of the dramatic, emotional, and erratic personality disorders, with BPD being the emotional, as it's also called emotionally unstable personality disorder. It's a pattern of abnormal behaviour characterised by extreme fear of abandonment, unstable relationships with others, sense of self or emotions, which leads to feelings of emptiness, dangerous behaviour and self-harm. So yeah, not great. Not a great thing to be labelled with, but people with BPD often engage in idolisation and devaluation of others, alternating between high positive regard and great disappointment. Substance abuse, depression and bipolar commonly coexist with borderline personality disorder. This is the great statistics. About 10% of women die by suicide, whereas 20% of men die by suicide. Research has shown that up to 50% of those suffering with a coexisting mood disorder will die by suicide. Now, for someone with borderline bipolar, that's not a great factor here, but I suppose it is what it is. So, as I mentioned briefly, BPD is mainly a disorder of the emotion. Now, a lot of people assume that it's just that people with BPD are more sensitive than other people, and to be honest, I don't think that's a fair reflection of the disorder. We're not necessarily more sensitive, we just feel emotions to the extreme, whereas you may feel fear, we will feel terror, you feel happiness, we will feel extremely ecstatic, you feel depressed, we might feel suicidal. So it's just basically that we feel the extremes of emotions rather than being able to feel an in-between ground between emotions. And also we have a lot more emotional mobility, so our emotions will change quite rapidly. We may feel a different emotion every 5 minutes, and that obviously, when that comes to friendships, that's extremely hard to maintain friendships and relationships, due to the fact that you are so changeable, and there doesn't need to necessarily be any trigger to that change, and basically it means that for our self-esteem and our ego, we struggle to understand who we are and what we believe, because what we believe and what we think is changing by the minute. There's nothing solid to grab onto and to develop a personality from, and obviously that leads to our anxieties and depression. So when it comes to behaviour, our behaviour is very much influenced by our emotions. We'll engage in activities that will help offset the emotion, maybe try and maybe reverse the emotion or try and level out the emotion. So it's quite common for people with BPD to engage in substance or alcohol abuse, to develop eating disorders, engage in unprotected sex, reckless spending, reckless driving. Basically, people with BPD, they struggle with extreme, impulsiveness. They are unable to moderate their emotions, so therefore their behaviours are just as erratic as their emotions can be. And it's basically down to due to the fact that they seek immediate relief from the extreme emotional pain that you can go through, from just experiencing the extreme and violent mood swings that we'll have. And that is the reason behind why the disorder is so linked to self-harm, suicide. It's an attempt by the person to try and gain control over their life and their emotions when they just feel like they're not in control. One of the most damaging things with BPD is an aspect of BPD called splitting, and this is especially bad for interpersonal relationships. Splitting is the idea that people with BPD rarely see a grey area. Things are quite black and white, so it's hard to see a person as a mixture of good and bad. People are either all good or all bad, and when that comes to relationships, that can be quite hard, especially if you're switching back and forth between thinking that someone is all good and all bad. That can mean that your relationships can be extremely intense, and it can be very hard in that way, like I said before, to maintain relationships. So now I've talked about what BPD is, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the treatment options are for the disorder, and medication which can be useful. And now, in terms of medication, there is no licensed drug which is aimed solely at treating borderline personality disorder. Instead, people tend to take a cocktail of drugs to help with symptoms of borderline personality disorder, such as emotional instability and impulsiveness. And I know I take medication for those reasons. But in terms of psychological input, Marshall Linehan has developed a therapy called dialectical behavioural therapy, which I've been actively engaged in, and to be honest, I found it's been extremely useful in just helping to change the way that you think and how you react. Now, other than that, there's very little evidence-based research. It's notoriously a difficult disorder to treat, and the bane of many psychologists. But if you do find something that works, stick with it, because it is something that is a very deeply ingrained disorder, and otherwise impossible to treat if you don't go out and seek help. I'm going to put a link in the down bar to a charity called Campaign Against Living Miserably, primarily involved in the prevention of male suicide, but they do take all calls. It's extremely good charity, and I know that I found a lot of help, speaking to the volunteers through Facebook and on the website. So like I say, I'll link that, and I'll also link just a list of medications I've been on before and what's helped for me, and what my thoughts are on the side effects. But apart from that, I'm going to end it here now, because I think I've been rambling for a little while. Thanks for watching.